Hey guys, so yeah, so there's only two of us here, but that's okay. I think that this morning what I wanted to do is to revisit our kind of detail drawing element that we were going to do, that we did do last week. I think that there's a couple things, given some comments at the very end of class last week, by others in some of your classes, it sounds like there's we'll call it a need, but a willingness, and also for the future uh, to have an ability to import a PDF or insert a PDF into our Revit documents. And what we can do is we can actually trace out an existing detail. So this can be done in a couple different ways. Say, somebody in the office or yourself, if you prefer to draw by hand, this is just a handy way of drawing a detail not entirely from scratch. So if you have an idea or a sketch, you can take that sketch, scan it, and import it into Revit, and then start the process of creating a detail. So, like I said, there's two different ways of doing this. One is through what's called a drafting view, and a drafting view is not tied to the model in any way. So, the drafting view kind of exists as, call it like a detail sheet that has no linked information back to BIM. So if you're going to change something like a wall or something like this, it's not going to be representative of a change inside of the model. These can be great. Usually in previous experiences, I've used them for details that I just can't model properly. So trying to think of a good example. Something might be like the nosing of a stair, a really big blow up, like a 1 to 2 detail, a really small detail of something, or I should say large detail. Something like a 1 to 2 detail. So 1 to 2, is the scale. So 1 to 2 is very, very large. And these can be really helpful for really, I'm going to say small, but really small components that we draw at a really small scale, which makes them big drawings. Not to confuse anybody. The way that we did it on Wednesday last week was we took the existing model, we blew up uh, a detail. So using a call out, we blew up a call out detail and then established a kind of boundary condition for how we were going to draw a relevant component inside of our building. So for us, in your D&D classes, so I understand it, there is this, we'll call it a reference PDF. So there's a reference PDF that is accessible by anybody. And I do think that this represents, again, I'm going to say this on camera, so I got to be careful here. It represents essentially what I used to do a lot in the office is you can take somebody's sketch and you are literally going to trace out that detail. I want to be careful around plagiarism. Others have different expectations of what this looks like. I would, advise you to do your best to draw it. Everybody should do their own work, but I do think that construction details exist for us to borrow and amend and make changes to. But in lots of ways, you're going to be replicating details. If not in D&D, definitely in the future. Somebody's going to hand you a drawing. You're going to trace that drawing. You need to understand what all the components are and what they're doing in your drawing. But why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm going to share my screen and I'll walk you through a detail here. So I'll share my screen and you're welcome. Oh, you're welcome to follow along. I've already got Revit fired up here. You're welcome to fire up Revit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk us through the part how we can get this is arguably a detail that's already been done on a different project, but what we can do is this drawing was originally done in AutoCAD. This is a drawing done in AutoCAD. And this is from the LRC, go figure, the Humber Library Resource Commons. And what we can do is we can grab a PDF or a JPEG or something like this, some sort of image type, and import it into Revit, and then start to give us some ability to trace out the detail. So using things like filled regions and detail lines and detail components. So those are the three kind of tools that we use to get at something like this detail, which is in a drafting view. Why don't I go ahead and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to I'm going to undo all this so you guys can see my process for how we're going to get into this. So last week, basically, sorry, excuse me, 2 weeks ago, when I did this last, we just kind of ended on how to get the area plan in here, right? So the area plan's all finished up. That being said, what we'll do is we'll actually start with how to get a PDF into Revit here. So that would be the first step, right? So why don't I just go ahead and first step is you definitely need to have a PDF. So you need to have a PDF drawing or a JPEG drawing. You can have it as a scan. So I know we have scanners at the LRC. Sorry, excuse me, at Humber. So we've got scanners that we can scan information and then actually import it into the model. So here I've got a kind of suite of details. I think I've shared this before in class, but if I haven't, just a quick refresher. This is all details. These are all details from the LRC that was drawn in 2014 or so. And what I'm going to do first is I really want to isolate just one detail for us to draw. If you don't have Bluebeam, this is Bluebeam I'm working on right now. You don't have to use Bluebeam. This is just what I like to use. You just need to get it in a manageable one. What I like to do is get it into a manageable one drawing at a time. So one drawing at a time is going to be the best way for us to get this detail drawing into Revit, and then we'll just go ahead and we'll start to trace some of those elements out. Um, Again, this is going to be just like how we might do it in AutoCAD. So if you can do it on AutoCAD, you can do it in Revit. That's kind of the goal here, is to show you some use cases for us inside of Revit where you might be compelled to use AutoCAD, you can just use Revit for the same work. Okay, so what do I want to do? I'm going to grab this. First steps first, we want to grab just this detail. And if you've never used Bluebeam before, it's great. I think there is a free version online for students. I can't remember. It seems to kind of change yearly. So take a look at bluebeam.com. I think it is bluebeam.com. If you really want to try and get at the software, it's excellent. I use it all the time. I used to use it all the time in the office until I started working for Humber full time here. So, and that being said, I'm using it right now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab this detail. This is a base detail. We got some masonry in here. We got some insulation. We have that mortar dropping control. We got some concrete back here, a little furring channel, and some gypsum with a curtain wall sill section just hanging out here with the sill. So I did a little bit of this last week, but I think that I'm trying to make it a more recorded element here so you guys can use it in future scenarios for D&D or others. So here we go. First thing I got to do is create a new sheet here. So in Bluebeam, I'm just going to go and create a new PDF. And what I want to do is, roughly speaking, I'm going to create an 11 by 17, just single sheet. I know this just because of experience, but generally speaking, a 1 to 5 detail should fit on an 11 by 17, depending on the size of the detail. So 11 by 17 or an my goodness, A3 if you're into the metric stuff, 11 by 17 inches. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a portrait, hit OK. And I have my blank panel. So this is just my blank panel. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and come back into my working drawing set here. Whoops, wrong working drawings. My working drawing set here. And I actually want to grab a snapshot. So for us, inside of Bluebeam, a snapshot is very similar to the snipping tool. The snipping tool you might remember from, if I just type snipping tool, very similar to the snipping tool. We hit new and it gives us a little snip, right? So we can do it like this. So maybe I can go through and just walk you through what that looks like after this. In Bluebeam, grabbing a little, I think they just call it a snapshot. So it's a snapshot tool. It's G is a shortcut if you ever get into Bluebeam here. So I'm going to click that snapshot, grab ourselves this image, hold, release. Now I've got it on the clipboard. So it's just hanging out on the clipboard. I'm going to jump back to my blank sheet here, and I'm going to copy paste, right? So I got copy paste in here. I need to place it somewhere. I don't want it out here, right? I want it on the sheet. So this is my little 11 by 17 here. Again, just to remind you, I'm going to be using this as a drafting view rather than inside of model space. We could do it in model space, but I'm going to do it as a drafting view for us today, just so you get a feel for what this looks like. It is, again, completely detached from the three-dimensional model here. So hanging out, right? Got it here. First thing I'm going to do inside of Bluebeam, this is just a personal preference, is that I am actually going to flatten this drawing. So once I flatten it, going to make it impossible for me to move this element here. And that's it. This is really step one. I've just got one detail, one sheet, high fidelity PDF, and we can see all the detail here from this detail. You know, the details that you use don't have to have this much detail, but it is helpful as a starting point. How would I get this information into Autodesk Revit? So I gotta save it. So I gotta save it as something smart. So I'm gonna save as, I like to start with a date. So this is always just a handy dandy professional practice way to do things. Start with your date, today's date, November 26th, and we'll look at the base detail import. Something like this. Done. And now I'm going to jump over into Revit 2025, and I need to get this drawing in here. So I'm actually going to, I did this earlier, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this just so we'll start from scratch. And you might think that, say, for instance, we had a detail that we wanted to use this PDF, we can certainly do it that way. So that PDF as a reference. If I was to jump to my detail sheets, we're going to do the A500 here. So just as an example, not really helpful for our current use case. You know, I might be able to sneak some of that information from the sill into this. But for us, what I'd like to do is just something completely different that we haven't done yet. And that is to create a couple of detailed views inside of drafting views. So the drafting views again. So if we come over to, sorry, I got this microphone in my face, but I guess I'll have to fix that. So these are our drawing sheets, right? So we got our drawing sheets all set up. However, I don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to jump up here to the drafting view. If we click that little drafting view button, you go to view, the view tab, click drafting view, click that open, and now a new little menu pops up, and I'm going to call this masonry base with curtain wall. It's a little bit of a different interface, right? So again, this has no link to the model per se. This has no physical, how do I say physical link? It has no geometrical link to the model. There's no geometry here. This is just creating a blank sheet. And here I'm going to set it to 1 to 5. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Ta-da! What you should see on the left is we should see a little populated drafting view emerge here. So over here on the left, we'll see in our project browser, masonry base with curtain detail, blank screen, right? So what we want to do is we want to get our base detail into Revit. So we want to get that base detail into Revit so we can start to trace some of the components here. What I can do now is a couple different ways we can get it in is that we can either import it or we can link it. My suggestion for everybody here is that we actually link these files, because if we link them, the link button is just up here under, link this file, because what will happen is if you make changes, we do make changes, or your boss will make changes, or you will make changes. And what this does is the link will let you refresh the link. An import imports all the information from the PDF. The import's over here. You can really do either way. I would suggest linking. So let's go ahead and we'll link that PDF here. I know that I've titled it by the date, 2024, 11/26. I'm going to go ahead and hit open. And now it's going to ask me, what resolution would you like? So what resolution would you like on this little PDF that we're giving an import to? And this can be an easy step to miss. So I'll give you an example of what can go, not what can go wrong, but what you might miss here. So we really want to set this resolution to a minimum of 300 DPI, so dots per inch. But if I set it to 72, I'll just show you a quick okay here. We got a little, place. So this is really how do I place my PDF? It can be anywhere. It doesn't really have, again, there's no geometrical link back to the model. So it can be anywhere on this, in this blank space. Let's click once here and you might import it and go, well, what the heck did I do? Right? What the heck did I do? Why is it like this? I can barely read anything. And that's because you may have missed that one step there. We can't change any of um, the dots per inch in this phase. So what you would have to do is you'd have to relink that file. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete this and make sure when we do our link PDF, find the same file and do it and hit open. And I'm going to do it the same way, except I'm going to change this to 300 DPI dots per inch, hit OK. And now we've got a little bit more fidelity in our drawing. So this can be a really helpful way to get some, two ways to do this. One is to get the information very quickly into your drawing, and you can get these drawings onto a sheet, lickety split. The experience of this is just that we can place this on a sheet as is. But for us, what we're going to do is we're going to trace out some of these components and try and make this a real Revit detail. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is, or what I like to do is we want to check the scale. So we know that this drawing should be, you can see over here, we click on the drawing and we've got 5. So 1 to 5 looks good. However, this is an image. It's not a tried and true uh, drawing 1 to 5. We don't know. We don't know how this drawing was originally created. We can guess that 1 to 5 is correct. But for us, what we're going to do is we're just going to do a quick double check. And we're going to make sure that this dimension here from here to here is 66. So again, I'm going to zoom out 1 second. If we click on the image itself, we should see this horizontal scale here. We can see that we've got a 1 to 5 detail from the original. This should be 1 to 5. But let's just double check. So I'm going to come over here and I'm actually just going to dimension this. So if I measure between two references here, so I'm going to dimension from here to here. What do we got? 65.9. So very, 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 very close. This is likely just an issue of where I took this dimension. When we're scanning things and we're drawing to scale, we want to make sure that we insert all of that information to make sure that we've got the correct scale in our little drafting view here. Otherwise, you're going to end up with some pretty wonky numbers. We can do a double check on a different dimension just to make sure. I usually like to do 2 just to make sure that we're cool. So remember that we have our little measurement tool. I've already lost it. Where is it? Goodness gracious. Did it go? Aha, my brain. Okay. Second one here. So let's just go ahead and we'll measure this 70. So we got 70 from the detail here. So make sure when you're importing, you've got some reference here. So 70.3 looks good. So 70.3, this is exactly what we want. We've got the right scale for the right drawing. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start to, well, actually, first we're going to lock the drawing. And then we're going to start to add some detail. Scale looks good. And so what we can do is, so I should do this first. Say, for instance, you've got this detail at 1 to 5, and you would really like it to make it 1 to 10, right? So you really want to make this 1 to 10. Well, you can, of course, do it outside of Revit, and you can, import a half scale drawing. So if I was to take the other one and scale it and then import it. Conversely, we can also change this to be half the scale, right? So if I'm going to make this a 1 to 10 drawing, it's going to get smaller. So I'm going to make this 2.5 by 2.5, and now we have a 1 to 10 drawing. So if I come back in here and I make this 1 to 10, I should end up with, if this is 50, this should actually now be 75, but let's just double check, right? So roughly 75, 74.1 here. Right. So instead of this being 1 to 5 now, this is a 1 to 10 drawing. Be very careful because your dimensions aren't going to update. So my recommendation is typically if it exists as a 1 to 10, sorry, excuse me, as a 1 to 5, we'll use that for now. We'll use that for now. So we're going to use 1 to 5 for our drawing itself. And the first thing that I like to do is pin our drawing. So you can see here, I'm just moving it around. If I hover over, I click and then hover over the PDF import inside of our drafting view, I can move the PDF image wherever I want to. And the problem with this is that if you're doing all your work and then you accidentally move this, it's going to be really hard to reline everything back up. Make sure I make this all 5 here to reline everything back up. So how do we pin things, right? So pinning in for a PDF is very similar to pinning for a curtain wall or pinning for walls or pinning for grids. All we have to do is just hit click our image, and then we're going to come over here to our modify tab. When you click on the image, it should automatically update. And we're going to jump over here to our little pin command, and it's going to lock this in place. Pin. And that's it. It's just gonna, now we can't move this image. Remember that you've used the pin. Sometimes that can be challenging as to when you forget that you've pinned an element. So to unpin it, we just come over here, we click on the image, we're gonna unpin. Click that little pin with the X. And now we can freely move it again. I'm gonna keep it pinned, so pin. And now we've got a nice little drafting detail view that we can use to start our detail. Another thing that you might want to do is change the, what I like to call overlay, but I assume there's a different name for it. We can actually change the, that's all correct. One second here. There is a way to do this. I've got to remember how to do it. What I'm trying to do is change it to an overlay here. So what we would do is, like a piece of trace paper, what would be great is if we could simply change the transparency of the image. And now I honestly can't remember if you can do this with graphics. So I thought you could, but maybe you can't. Like I cannot. Okay. Anyways, so if I find some more information on this, I'll release it to the chat here. But for now, what we've got is we've got this wonderful little image, and now we can start to draw in some of the detail components. So it's up to you how you really want to go about this. Certainly, there will be elements within here that we could use as, if you remember from last week's class, we've got our annotate tab, and we can use all of these components in here, our detail line, our filled regions, our components, and our repeating components. The insulation, we didn't really talk about too much, but maybe I can do that today. Detail groups are another really helpful thing where we've got, remember, we've got groups, but we've also got detail groups. So this can be a group of detail lines, regions, and components that we can then copy paste into other details that we might be using. So where do we want to start, right? Where do we want to start? What we might start with is the grids. It's usually my favorite place to start, just so we have a kind of understanding of about where the drawing might be taking place. If it's a completely irrelevant drawing, you might not need to use the grids themselves. So again, these grids that you're going to be drawing are not tied to any piece of your model. So be very careful when we're drawing grids here. Because what I'm actually going to do is I'm drawing detail lines, detail lines as basically as grids. I'm going to just jump in here. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to draw a quick little detail line for my grid. Right. So this has no link to the model. I'm just going to reiterate that. Very important. Because what's going to happen is it's just giving me a reference point. So if we need to imagine where a grid line is in our project, we know where our grid line is based on where it is in model space, but there is no model inside of this view. This view is completely devoid of any Revit information, any 3D information. It's just existing on its own as a 2D drawing. I'm going to draw that little thing here. And why don't I just quickly draw a couple other things? So annotate, I'm just going to draw a little bubble for us. So annotate, draw a little bubble, use the lines here, something like this. My wonderful green bubble, which we can change if we need to. Oh, I'm realizing that, oops. Sometimes what you can see is happening to me is that it's still letting me select the image beyond. Trying to not have it do that, but it is doing that. I'm gonna grab my D up in here. Little grid line, little D. And so typically the drawing process that I like to do is I want to get as many of the datums in first. So the datums being things like my grid, things like my bubbles, and then start to draw the structure. So I like to draw the structure second. And then I like to draw uh, the membranes, right? And then the insulation, and then the cladding. And then sometimes, if we do have some interior elements, we can come back and draw those. So that's just the process that I like to use. You're welcome to use whatever process you want to do. One thing I should say is that in this example, it will be very difficult to have these callouts. So these callouts that we haven't done this yet, but these are what are called will be what are called dummy tags. So again, because there's no 3D information inside of this drafting view, it's very difficult to have these callout tags representative of any information inside of BIM. And I'll show you what that means in a little bit, but just to preface this, we're going to do a lot of the detail, but we can't get the information that is crucial to how Revit operates. So use these detail views sparingly. Okay, so we got our grid in there. Let's draw. I like to use the create similar command here. So I'm just going to type CS, give us a little level. So again, this is very different from how we were using Revit previously. So please be mindful that you are just drawing 2D components right now, like you would draw in AutoCAD. It is by no means the best way to do this. It is a way to do it if you've got an existing set of details to get some information. Get some information into the drawing. So that shortcut there is TX that I keep typing. So TX and CS for our little drawings here. So CS is command create similar. Gonna do a little arc here for our wonderful little bubble. And I'm gonna do my little 169, 150. You can see here, I'm just populating some of the datums so that I can get an idea of where these crucial components of my detail element need to live. So what do I got here? 150 by, what does that need to be? 400? Perfect. 69.55. This top, so TO is top of, in case anybody's curious, top of curb. A curb is, in this case, it's a piece of concrete. So we've got a concrete curb surrounding the building. So you can see the concrete here is hatched in this concrete pattern. And I'm just giving us, I just want to do two datums here just so we can see what is going on. You know, one thing we can do if we kind of want to preview what's going on, you can do this a couple different ways. I'm just going to hide it, right? So we can preview what's going on, and by right-clicking and hide the element, hide in view. or we can completely get rid of it. I would advise for us, we just kind of hide the element so that we can bring it back and keep doing our detail lines in our filled regions in an effort to get a more detailed version of this drawing. I'm going to keep going here. Why don't we do a little filled region here? So I'm going to do up to the annotate tab, region, filled region, and I'm going to look for, okay, we don't have concrete, right? So for now, I'm just going to draw a couple of, why don't we do, oh, I don't even have my opaque one here. That's okay. Diagonal crosshatch. Let's start with, you know what? We should probably do this anyways. So let's start with diagonal crosshatch. But I'm actually going to come in here and we're going to create a concrete hatch here. So just so you guys can see how to do this, edit type, and we're going to duplicate this. Sorry, I've got my menu enormous here. So a couple things, you're probably going to need a concrete hatch, right? So most of us have a concrete building. I leave it to you if you use just a gray pattern, if you want a gray concrete pattern, which is usually the way that I would draw detail. I'm going to duplicate it here and call us, concrete, for instance, and duplicate. So I've duplicated that filled region. And the first thing we're going to see is this foreground fill pattern. You can see we've got all of these fill patterns already pre-baked inside of Revit. Concrete is here. That's excellent. That's what we're going to use. So just so you know, there are these pre-baked ones. We can generate additional ones if we want to, but for our purposes, we've only got a little bit of time here. So I'm going to create a concrete one, hit OK. And we've got a couple things here. We can change the foreground fill pattern. So if I wanted to change this to be maybe gray, I'll make it a little gray color. And I'm going to hit apply here. And make sure that you've got masking on. So masking is going to mask. So if you've ever done painting, masking is going to mask over the region that we're drawing. So you'll actually make whatever's behind it disappear. I hit OK here. And let's see what we got. So, I'm still inside of the filled region tool here. So I've got concrete, filled region. If I just go ahead and I'm going to trace this dimension here. So let's trace this out. I can see that I've got 150, so I'm really going to do my best. You can see how 150 there is populating. Looking good. Got a little piece here. I'm going to trace this out. You can see how Revit also versus AutoCAD makes it pretty snappy to trace these things out. Keep it horizontal. Sorry, keep it vertical. So 225. That's not quite right. So 225.6. If you do see little elements like this, you can see my little dimension. Maybe you can't. It says 225.6. Really, I should come back in and make sure. You can see that 75 here, 75.6. I'm going to make this 75 so we don't mess around too much with our overall dimensions. We can keep these dimensions pretty tight. So if you are tracing something, make sure that you've got something in place to make sure that you've got your dimensions correctly accurate. That 402 is okay, but let's just double check this dimension here. I'm going to dimension I'm dimensioning right now the filled region. So remember, we're still inside of the filled region tool. We can tell that because we've got this little check mark here in the X. Your filled regions have to be closed loops. So if I hit that check mark here, wonderful, right? So you can see here we've got our concrete, right? Concrete's done. If I want to come back in here and edit this, maybe I want a little thicker line here. I can actually make this wide lines. Check mark again. Nice, beefy concrete. So you can see here we've got our scale for our hatch even is also coming into effect, right? So, and I just right click here and I'm going to hide this in the view just so you can see this is actually what's in our drawing. We've just drawn the concrete. That's it. I'm going to do that real quick. But what else did we have here, right? So what else did we have? We've also got in behind, right? In behind this, we've got a piece of steel. This is a piece of steel with some anchor bolts, and that's tied into the masonry shelf angle out here. So why don't we go ahead? Why don't we draw this as well? And the way that we're going to do that, you can do it a couple different ways. If you'd like to use the line tool, you can do that. Or we can also use a filled region to draw these components as well. For our purposes, let's draw the anchor bolts as the line tool, and then we'll actually draw this piece of steel. I think this is a 10 millimeter piece of plate steel embed inside of this concrete wall. So we'll go ahead and we can draw that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to hide this real quick. Hide in view. I'm going to hide this real quick just so we can get back to this and make sure we've got the drawing correct for our little steel piece here. So annotate, filled region, I'm going to jump to steel. Oh, there's no steel here. So we're also going to have to create a new steel one, which is fine. So edit type, come in here, go to steel, hit OK. I guess, we'll probably make this black. It's probably better black. Hit OK. Did I duplicate that? I didn't duplicate it. What a goof. Undo everything I just did. Undo everything I just did. Detail, edit type, duplicate. Thank you. Steel. Click that little ellipsis, jump down to steel, hit OK. I'm going to make this instead of gray, I'm going to make it black. Hit OK, hit OK. And now I'm going to do a nice little trace of, I think this is a 10 millimeter plate steel component. Oh, it's 6. That's okay. So 6 millimeters or so. Make sure that loop is closed. And now I hit a little check mark again. Look at that. If I go ahead and I'm going to unhide this, sorry, I'm going to hide this element here. Just got that little piece of plate steel hanging out. Some other things we might want to do are these detail lines. So I'm going to grab detail line. I'm going to do hidden. Hidden means that it's, it's either beyond in the view. So these are little anchor bolts. It's embedded inside of the concrete. These don't have to be perfect. I think when I probably drew these originally, they were 38. Oh, they are 38. Okay, 38, just little. This does not have to be perfect. And then just tie them. That's 19, which is half of 38. 19. And now if I go ahead and I'm just gonna, again, you should be able to, I think you guys have the idea here. I'm drawing each piece of the detail, right? So what I can do here is if I want to, I can select both of these pieces and I can copy this down to do the second one. So if I hit this little copy, copy this down, 150, looking good. Okay, we'll skip this one for now because I don't have a component for it. But what I can do is I also see that what we've got now is I should really come back in here. I'm going to just unhide my element here. And now we've got this, starting to be just a piece of concrete wall with some added detail in it. So concrete, steel, anchor bolts, all this fun stuff. One thing that you might notice is if you've drawn this in a different order than I've drawn, what you can end up with is your concrete in front. So the concrete is currently in front of the detail. And what that means is even though we have these other pieces, they're just hiding out beyond. So they're hiding out beyond in the detail. We're actually going to send this to the back and make sure. So just again, for us to see this, click on whatever filled region or component you're looking at, and you're going to jump up to the arrange. And up here, we've got bring to front or send to back. So I'm going to send that to the back. And I'm actually going to just have to jump back in here to my reveal hidden elements and turn my view back on here. Unhide. And should be back in action here. Yeah, perfect. So what else do we want to draw? What else do we want to draw in here, right? For us, why don't we go ahead and we can draw the AVB. So the air vapor barrier. It's kind of, we can also hit thin lines in our drawing here. So thin lines can help us just see some extra fidelity here if we want to do that. But let's draw the air vapor barrier in here, and I'll show you just a quick little tip on how we can draw detail lines inside of our detail views in a kind of effective way. Annotate, and we're going to do our detail line again, and check out this offset here. So, you can either painfully trace out our little AVB here, our air vapor barrier with all its laps. You can see all the laps here. It's called the shiplapped joints. This is all for water deflection. So wherever you see something like this, it's a shiplapped joint. My building science professor used to say that we put our we put our pants over our boots, right, to keep the rain out. It would be silly to put our pants into our boots, right? So, which I always thought was interesting, given that I've seen lots of people with rain boots and they stash their, like on a rainy day today, stash their pants directly into their boots. That's where all the rain goes. So shiplapped means that any water that does come down kind of gets lapped out away from the building. Okay, but we're drawing a line. So if I want a little membrane here, if you remember from last class, we did do a kind of brief introduction to how to create new line types. And new line types are going to be effective for us here because we don't really have a way to draw a membrane type effectively. So for us, what we can do is we can start with, let's just start with hidden here. And I'll show you what that looks like. It's probably not going to be the right thickness. So this is how, when I was working in AutoCAD, this is how I would draw a membrane, really thick dashed line with two lines on either side, right? So we're drawing it like these really heavy dash dot style of lines. So what I can do to start us off here is I'm actually going to offset by 5 mm. So I'm going to jump here 5 mm. And now because we've got our concrete kind of started, what I can do is if I take a line here and you see this little chain here, I got the chain on and I'm going to click once. And when I start to draw, if you remember this from previous classes, I've got that 5 mm offset from the thing that I'm drawing on. So this can be really effective for when we're drawing things like membranes. And if it's chained, I'm just going to keep drawing here. I'm going to draw us all the way down here and trace this line. Keep going here, all the way to the bottom. And now if I go ahead and I'm just going to hide that element, I have the first steps of what my membrane might look like, right? If I tab select, I can select the entire line and I can change that to, some other line type. What do we got here? Wide lines. Boom, super heavy. So for us, what we'd like to do is change it to maybe a little bit, excuse me, change it to a little bit more robust line here. I think that it's going to look better. It's going to be better for us in terms of aesthetic. So if you remember from Wednesday, I'm myself going to have to remember, I don't use this tool that much. I think that for most of us, for 99% of us, when you step into an office, most of these line types should already be set. There is, unless you're starting your own firm, which is totally cool, starting your own company, working for somebody who is starting a company, these things should be preset. So if I jump into I believe it's in manage here. Yeah, manage and additional settings. So this can be a tricky menu to get to for setting up some of these line types. Just like in AutoCAD, to set up our line types, we do it I would say at the beginning of the project and make sure you've got all the line types that you need before you get started. But you can, of course, add new line types as you go. So here we go. So line styles, line weights, line patterns, fill patterns, all these fun things hanging out here for us. I believe it's line weights here. Nope. So line weights, this is a line weight table. I know that I cover this in class. I would say don't touch this. It's probably the safest way for all of us is that don't touch this. I would argue that we leave this to what's called I say the BIM captain, but I've already forgotten what the name is. Basically, the person who is responsible for all of the BIM, the building information modeling, should be the only person who's touching this, unless you are really, really uh, happy to make these changes. This is how we control the final output of what the drawings are going to print like at different scales, given different line weights. This is like a plot table in AutoCAD. I would suggest that you kind of don't touch this. So that's my bad. But let's get into here. Additional settings. Oh, I just clicked that. Excuse me. Line styles. So we're going to come into line styles here and click that little plus button here, we can see these are all the lines that currently exist in our drawings. We do want to have one for a membrane. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a new category and hit new here, new membrane, just to remind everybody from last week. So membrane, good to go, and expand this a little bit. And line weight projection, let's give it a 5. So you can see here, this is all coming from our line weight table. So let's give it a 5, and we'll change it's annoying that you can't see what these look like. So let's do a dash 1.5 millimeters, see what that looks like. So we got a thickness, a line thickness of 5. You probably aren't going to go anywhere up above 6. You might, but I doubt it. 6 is a pretty beefy line. So membrane, hit OK or apply and OK. And we should, by tab select here, we should see a new line style emerge here. So membrane, right? Pretty thick, looking good. I leave it to you if this is exactly what you want. I know that Revit has a habit of, you can see everything is rounded, and I feel like it gives the drawings a little bit of a cartoonish element. It's unfortunately pretty baked in. That's okay. I would argue that's one of the big differences between AutoCAD drawing and Revit drawing is you can see everything has these curved edges, right? So anything that would normally be drawn in AutoCAD as these really crisp, really crisp square-like things becomes these rounded elements. And that's okay. So I've gotten in trouble for this before, but I'm going to show you something that I like to do. This is all up to personal drawing preference and the drawing standards of whichever firm you happen to be working for. I can see here that I might want to offset by 1 millimeter or so. So I'm actually going to offset this by 1 and turn off copy and just give myself a little bit of space off of the element here, right? So, and the last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually, if you remember from my drawing here, I've got, whoops, that's really hard to see now, but I've got this kind of, double-sided. There's a little line on both sides here. There's a little line on both sides to kind of show a kind of thickness to this membrane. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. Again, like I said, I got in trouble for this before. It gives a lot of detail to a drawing where you might not need it. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So that detail line, that shortcut is DL. And I'm going to do lines here, thin lines. And I'm going to go ahead and I can't remember how thick this line is. So I'm going to dimension it real quick. So let's see what we got. About 5 millimeters. So about 5 millimeters. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to come back, annotate, detail line, and I'm actually going to offset by 2.5. Watch this. Watch this. And I'm going to give ourselves a little, little bit of thickness here. A little bit of extra detail. If this is what you prefer to do, that's totally cool. If not, just leave it as a dashed line. I would argue most of the Revit projects I've been in don't require this. This is a lot of extra drawing too. So imagine every single piece of your detail that you wanted to, sorry, every single piece of membrane that you wanted to kind of give that extra little detail to. It can be a lot of extra drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unhide my element in the view. So I'm going to unhide this. And what else do we need to get in here? So maybe what we can do here is start to get some other components in here. If you remember from last week, there's a couple different ways we can get this piece of steel in here. This, I believe, is going to be a 76 by 76, probably my guess. How would we get there? It's a 76 by 76 little, 102. So it's a 102 by 102. Oh, 102 by 89. Perfect. A 102 by 89 masonry shelf angle here. So masonry shelf angle is how we're supporting the actual brick. And what we can do here is we can actually grab it from the component library. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, from the component library. So we're going to grab a detail component, Right. Okay. So currently I've got some detail components in here, but I likely don't have my steel set up yet. So let's see if we got some steel. I got one of these bad boys. Useless. So if you remember from last week, we did this as part of the detail family. So we're going to load a family in here. So go up to, you can do it a couple ways. We can go to the component, detail component load family. And in this case, I've already got my stuff set up, but let's just jump all the way up to Revit 2024 or 2025. I have 2024 is from the imported version. If we go into libraries here, English, make sure you're using the English and not the English Imperial. And remember, we're looking for detail items. So detail items is here. Going to metals, division 5. Um, Structural steel, 05120. And I am looking for an L angle section. So metric, M for metric, L angle section, hit open. And got this big ass table I am looking for. There's no filter in this, unfortunately. I'm looking for a 102 by 89. So I'm going to jump down here, 102 by 89. I'm going to get, and the last number here is the thickness. So the thickness, it's up to you. You can measure it from the existing drawing, or you can kind of ballpark it, right? So guess it. So hit OK. And now, ta-da, if I hit space, I can rotate this. Bam. Aha. So you can see here, something's not quite right. What's not quite right is that the rotation is not quite what I want. So that's okay. Click to place, and I'm gonna hit space. I'm actually gonna mirror this. So if you do end up with a situation where you need what's called the long leg to be vertical, LLV, long leg vertical, what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna mirror this. I'm gonna mirror it, turn off copy, and just mirror it in place. And drop this somewhere in here. And now we've just got this extra piece of steel here. This is how we're going to support our brick. Looking pretty good. Looking pretty good. One thing is that we might want to do is create a, normally I would draw this in class. It's going to be pretty hard for me to draw this. This is a cut piece of angle. So like this, but vertical, like this piece of angle, but vertical, and then tied to the piece of steel here. But that being said, what we would do is just draw it as a filled region. And in this case, I'd like to do it as a transparent filled region. So I'll go through what that looks like. Uh, Maybe that'll be the last thing we do here. But annotate, region, filled region. And what I'm going to look for is transparent white. So transparent white is, this is a non-masked version. So a non-masked transparent version. And if I go ahead and I'm going to do a filled region here, I need a filled region for this element beyond here. So this element beyond that kind of sits as a support for this edge masonry shelf angle. It's how we're going to tie the supporting elements of our masonry shelf angle back to the building. So we've drawn our plate, and now we're going to draw. We're going to draw our little piece here. So remember closed loops. So I'm just going to quickly do this. Try and keep your numbers roughly accurate. So I can see here I've got a closed loop. I'm going to hit check mark. So in this case, this should be a transparent version, but it's actually masking my PDF as well. I'm just going to double check and make sure that it's not masking. So it's not masking. Here, just so you can see that it's not masking, but it is a white fill here. So what does it mean that it's not masking? If I move this element over, we can still see all of the other elements beyond, right? So I've moved it over. It's transparent. So it's transparent. However, it's not transparent to the PDF, which sucks. I don't know why it's like that, but it's transparent. And now what we can do is we're actually going to just tidy this up by creating a final one here, which is actually going to link this little piece back to the uh, the steel embed plate itself. So I'm going to control excuse me, I'm going to create similar. I'm going to draw a little final. This is really the edge of the angle that's being welded to our little plate at the back here. Now, what's my dimension? Well, that's not correct. What do we got? Give myself a little dimension here, all the way back to that plate. Maybe it's, whoops, do that. Excuse me. Give ourselves a little dimension and try that again. Mentioned the wrong thing. Yeah, probably supposed to be 10. So let's just go ahead and type 10 here. It's getting a little finicky, but that's okay. And then if I hit check mark, whoops, if I hit check mark, we should see a transparent version, right? So it's just a transparent piece here. And it's really just to keep the visual fidelity up. Really, the idea here is that your membrane is going to come across the piece here and make sure that everything is fully protected. It's going to go ahead and hide this again. So let's hide in view, hide elements. No, we're started. We're started here. We got some, detail elements for showing our concrete and our shelf angle. This little piece in here. If we do need to make adjustments after the fact, we can of course grab these little pulls and we can change the size of our um, filled regions. You cannot do that with detail elements. So detail elements like this, you can't change. You have to go in and modify the family if you wanted to do it that way. But anything that's a filled region, you can modify kind of on the fly. So if I need to make this a little thicker, no problem. Okay. Let's go ahead and turn this back on hide and view. And oops, there we go. What did I do wrong? Maybe I'll just keep going here on a couple things. So one thing is if we've got a really, really tiny little element here, like our sill, I know I did this in class, I'm going to do it again right now, is we might want to create a filled region for, and I duplicate this, not duplicate, create similar for little filled region again. And I'm going to go ahead and grab lines here, and I'm going to just trace out what our sill looks like. Sill, come all the way down. So sill should probably be around 3 millimeters. We can use the offset tool here to create a copy of our 3 millimeters. If I hit tab, it's going to give me all the pieces. And then I'm just going to continue by closing off our loop. Make sure that's 70 there. That's what it should be. Hit check mark. And now we have, unfortunately it's in green, but we do have, this is a transparent version, so it's up to you. What we could do is we could actually edit the type, duplicate this, and I'm going to make it opaque white. Opaque, whoops. Opaque white. Hit OK, and make sure we tag this masking, that little check mark there. Hit OK. And now what happens is anywhere we put this, it's going to mask over the existing. Oops. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to jump over back to our little manage additional settings line styles, and I'm going to change the line color of our little lines here back to black. I don't know why it sets it as green, but just so that we can make sure everything's cool up in here. One thing I noticed in my D&D class from yesterday is people love drawing screws. People I know we love, there's a compulsion in the profession to draw screws. I would say that fasteners and screws can be really challenging to get into drawings. You can see here that we've got some screws in here. Realistically, the contractor is going to put screws where they believe is the best place. That being said, we can still insert a couple variations here on some screws. And how we do that, we're going to jump to insert, and I'm going to load a screw family. So let's see if we can find it first. Metal fastenings. So it should be in here. You can see all of these detail components. These are all nuts and bolts, right? So when I first started in architecture, I came in here and I used a lot of these to my detriment, I would say, is that so some of these are great. So expansion bolts, awesome. Love to see an expansion bolt. You don't want to have to draw that from scratch. I am just looking for a standard screw, just something to represent a screw. And of course, there's not one in here. So that sucks. But uh, so what we can do is say we've got a little screw like this. We can just draw it from scratch and create a little group and do something like this if you really, really, really want to draw the screws. Otherwise, what we can do is I have to remind myself where our families are. Where's my editor? Load Autodesk family. So this is something that I've recently started to use is Load Autodesk family. So for those of us that have downloaded the 2024 families, I find that probably the way that it's been done for so long that I can't say. It's probably been done for 15 years this way. So the load family tool is the way that I'm used to doing things. However, it's 2025, the future is coming. So load Autodesk family, we click this little button and we can see if we can find screw. Wonderful. So there's a couple screws in here that we can use. And this is all from the Load Autodesk family tool. If I jump in here, this is a 2D element. I'm going to hit load. It's going to load it for me. Where is it? Where is my stupid annotate? Come on, give me the component. Okay, there it is. Little drywall screw, right? No problem. If I hit space, I can kind of rotate it. Now you guys have the freedom to put screws in wherever you want. So that, maybe we got one up here. I realize this is a drywall screw, so not looking quite thick enough. So what we can do is we're going to jump back into our little, not add-ins, insert, excuse me, load Autodesk family, screw. Maybe we need a little, these are all drywall screws. So maybe I want to do bolts. So let's see what we get. What's amazing is these bolts have been around forever. It's the same bolt that I've seen for 15 years. Regardless, we're just adding some extra detail in here. It is a, uh, excuse me, it is a detail, what's this called? It's a drafting view, excuse me, drafting view of a detail with detail components within it. One thing that might be helpful, I realize we're over time here. I don't want to keep anybody too long. One thing that I think might be helpful is, as we add more detail into our detail, uh, it's always good to check, what it's going to look like on a sheet. So if I just right click here and hide this, we're a little light on the detail parts, but I got, I'm trying to talk through all of the steps to get us here. And typically in the office, you're going to generate a couple of these details and you're going to copy a lot of these elements, a lot of these filled regions across the detail components themselves. So what do? We've got this drafting view detail, and let's just throw this on a sheet. I think this is an important piece here. So if I double click on my sections and details, what I can do is grab that masonry base with curtain wall, drag it across here, and you can see here I've got my detail started, right? So it's going to be helpful to get details in a working capacity. So if I need to come in here and make some edits, remember we can activate our view. And one thing, oh, this is a huge problem. So I'm remembering this now. Inside of a drafting view, there is no way to crop the view. Please, please pay attention to this. The drafting views, I remember doing some of these and losing my mind. So it's a good thing to know is that there is no way, for whatever reason AutoCAD did this, there is no way for you to crop this view. So if I think I can hide this, hide the element. So that's cool. And move my little piece up here. But you can see that all of the components inside of that detail view are what Revit sees on the sheet. So unlike our views here, where we've got our crop view, so our little crop box, and then our annotation crop box, In a in a drafting view, we don't get that. You can see, if I click on here, you can see all these extents, crop view, crop region visible, annotation crop. Over here, none of it. So just fair warning, when we're doing this, remember anything that you've got as part of your drawing will show up, and you cannot crop it out. You cannot crop it out. So even if I wanted to crop out this little title here, I can't do that. I can't do that. So make sure that on the import side, we can make sure that we've got everything that we need, or we can crop it out before we insert it, or we can kind of turn off the elements that we don't want and use. So I hope that was helpful. I know that for everybody who's in D&D, I think that you guys have that existing PDF detail from somebody for, to get you started. I think this can be a really helpful way to get details going. I would argue it's not the only way, but it's certainly a way to do it. And super quick here as a last thing is, if you would prefer not to use drafting views, we can of course jump into our, it's going to go back to my sheet file here. Where's my sheet? 600. Whoops. And go back to my sill here. If we wanted to do it in this view, we can also do it here. So if I just jump in and link my PDF and make sure I got the right base detail in here. Remember our 300, setting to 300 in here. Hit OK. And the challenge here is it's going to be a little bit harder to see where we're putting it. And you can see already, because we've got lots of these elements already in the drawing, it's not quite giving us what we want. So sometimes what we can do is we can actually change the draw layer to the foreground and then do a couple of those detail components. But you can see how it's a lot harder to locate our drawing and the components therein. So caveats for how we're going to do things like, start from scratch and then draw our detail. Great way to do it. If you're going to think about drawing it in AutoCAD, for sure, import it, link it into Revit, start drawing here. Those detail lines are the exact same thing as how you would do it in AutoCAD. Once you get more familiar with the offset commands, the move commands, the copy commands, it is the exact same as drawing in AutoCAD. And now you've got a drawing that you can use again and again and again inside of Revit. So why don't I stop it there? And then tomorrow, we'll talk more about phasing and some other fun things that exist inside of Revit. And I hope this was helpful. I'll post this tutorial for everybody. I can see there's a question just before I end here. And sorry, I got you a question. Give me once. Aha, Yuming, no problem. So this is probably the biggest question here. So I was actually going to start with this, Yuming. So thank you for reminding me. I was cautious of time here. So let's pull up. I'm going to turn this off. So Yuming's asking, how do I get my area correct, right? So I know that. How do we combine the stairs? So how did I get this? How did I get this? And thank you for bringing it up, Yuming. This is by far the biggest conundrum of this exercise, and that's why I put it in the assignment. Is because I know that it's a hard one, something that I struggle with even just setting up the tutorial. So we're going to jump to our area plan and jump to our schedule. So for Yuming and for everybody else on the call, if I double click on the schedule here, we're going to jump to formatting and make sure when we're in formatting here, we're going to go to area and make sure that it says calculate totals. So chances are, if we've got no calculation, I'm going to hit OK here and show you what that looks like. We've got, I also see that we need to itemize every element here. So I'm going to jump here to itemize every instance. So now we've got both stairs hanging out. So two important steps there. We need to make sure that we turn off the itemize every instance, and we need to make sure that we have the formatting such that we do calculate totals. So area, calculate totals. So I'm going to do this as one step. So calculate totals, hit OK. Nothing happens, right? So that's because we've got this itemize every instance turned on. So if we itemize every instance, we're saying to Revit, please give me a number for every single element in my area plan. If I turn this off, hit OK, we should see 44 emerge. The last thing we need to make sure that we've got is a sorting and grouping. We need to make sure that we've got a sort by name just turned on. I think if I hit none, it's gonna make it, yeah, it's gonna make it disappear. So we got to make sure that we have a sort by name. Keep that on. Keep itemize every instance off. Formatting area. Make sure we got calculate totals. That should be good to go. Ta-da. So Yuming, that is the question of the hour. So I realize we've got a couple days left here, and it definitely has caught almost everybody. So thank you for the question. Does that help you, Yuming? I know it's a couple steps there. Hopefully we're all good. Okay. So for anybody who needs help, please help your peers if they've got the same question. That is, remember, it's in our formatting area. We want to see calculate totals in here. We want to make sure that we've got the sorting and grouping turned off for itemize every instance, and we've got a name sort done. What do we got? Good to go. Awesome, Yuming. Thank you so much. If you've got questions, Yuming, just send me a note, and I can hop on a call with you, and we can do it together if that was no fun. Oh, he's got to log out and go to school. Okay, that probably goes for everybody. So thank you everyone for joining today, and why don't I just stop it there? And I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you everybody for coming, and we'll chat tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.